Daily Words of God. The people of the last days only see God's wrath in His words, and do not truly experience the wrath of God. From the time of creation until today, no group has enjoyed as much of God's grace or mercy and loving kindness as this final group. Although in the final stage, God has done the work of judgment and chastisement, and has done His work with majesty and wrath. Most of the time, God only uses words to accomplish His work. He uses words to teach and water and provide and feed. God's wrath, meanwhile, has always been kept hidden, and apart from experiencing God's wrathful disposition in His words, very few people have experienced His anger in person. Which is to say, during God's work of judgment and chastisement, although the wrath revealed in God's words allows people to experience God's majesty and intolerance of offense, this wrath does not go beyond His words. In other words, God uses words to rebuke man, expose man, judge man, chastise man, and even condemn man. But God has yet to be profoundly angry toward man, and has barely even unleashed His wrath upon man outside of His words. Thus, the mercy and loving kindness of God experienced by man in this age are the revelation of God's true disposition, while the wrath of God experienced by man is merely the effect of the tone and feel of His utterances. Many people wrongly take this effect to be the true experiencing and the true knowledge of God's wrath. Consequently, most people believe that they have seen God's mercy and loving kindness in His words, that they have also beheld God's intolerance of man's offense, and most of them have even come to appreciate God's mercy and tolerance toward man. But no matter how bad man's behavior, or how corrupt his disposition, God has always endured. In enduring, His aim is to wait for the words He has spoken, the efforts He has made and the price He has paid to achieve an effect in those whom He wishes to gain. Waiting for an outcome such as this takes time and requires the creation of different environments for man, in the same way that people don't become adults as soon as they are born. That takes 18 or 19 years. And some people even need 20 or 30 years before they mature into a real adult. God awaits the completion of this process. He awaits the coming of such a time, and He awaits the arrival of this outcome. And throughout the time He waits, God is abundantly merciful. During the period of God's work, however, an extremely small number of people are struck down, and some are punished because of their grave opposition to God. Such examples are even greater proof of the disposition of God that does not brook the offense of man, and fully confirm the real existence of God's tolerance and endurance toward the chosen ones. Of course, in these typical examples, the revelation of part of the disposition of God in these people does not affect God's overall management plan. In fact, in this final stage of God's work, God has endured throughout the period He has been waiting, and He has exchanged His endurance and His life for the salvation of those who follow Him. Do you see this? God does not upset His plan without reason. He can unleash His wrath, and He can also be merciful. This is the revelation of the two main parts of God's disposition. Is this, or is it not, very clear? In other words, when it comes to God, right and wrong, just and unjust, the positive and the negative, all this is clearly shown to man. What he will do, what he likes, what he hates, all this can be directly reflected in his disposition. Such things can also be very obviously and clearly seen in God's work, and they are not vague or general. Instead, they allow all people to behold the disposition of God and what He has and is in an especially concrete, true, and practical manner. This is the true God Himself.